sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
It's always been fascinating to me how during the Halloween season in particular, we seem to be more inclined to believe in the supernatural, the paranormal, and we seem to kind of condition ourselves into believing in unusual occurrences. It's almost like we fine-tune our own personalities to draw bizarre, unusual, or creepy things to us. Maybe we just become more sensitive. Maybe that's the word for it. And we become a little bit more on guard, more aware of things, probably to the point of believing in things that really aren't there. But let me start with an example. This morning when I was heading off to the grocery store to do my weekly shopping, you all know that I shop very early, right after the store opens, and it's still dark when I do my shopping. I just prefer the stores not being too crowded. I can shop in peace and enjoy the view of the Mohawk Man and the bread guy. This morning, though, as I was backing out of my driveway, a neighbor's truck was parked in the street, and which is unusual. It doesn't always happen, but it makes it harder for me to see as I'm backing out of my driveway. I'm not that concerned because it's so early and almost everyone is asleep at that time. But this morning, as I'm backing out, I have to back out a little bit farther so I can see around my neighbor's truck. When I backed out far enough, I was nearly blinded by headlights from a car that was sitting in the street just beyond where the pickup truck was. And it freaked me out. I kept thinking, why are they sitting there like that? Now, maybe they were waiting for one of my neighbors to come out. Maybe they were going on a trip and they were just waiting for them to come out, not thinking that the bright lights of their headlights would be kind of disconcerting for a neighbor who is not used to being blindsided by headlights at 6 a.m. in the morning. What was even worse is as I backed out of my driveway and went down my street, suddenly this car began moving. And now that I'm in Halloween mode, that set off some alarm bells. This car is suddenly following me, almost as if they knew I would be leaving at 6 o'clock to go grocery shopping, and they were following me. It just felt really weird for a few seconds. I go out to the end of my street and turn right, keeping an eye on this vehicle, the headlights, seeing if they're still following me. And as I'm going down the other street, I noticed that they stopped and turned around and went back. Now I'm like, is that somebody planning to rob me or something? Maybe ambush me when I get back? Not too subtle though, were they? So this led me to thinking about weird, unusual things that happen to us that fall outside the norm. Have you ever heard, we were discussing it, I was talking about it with friends of mine a few weeks back. You know, we've talked about, well, in general terms, people talk about having a guardian angel, or how certain things, you know, like when somebody's in a car accident, and it seems like if they had been 15 seconds earlier or 15 seconds later, that accident wouldn't have happened. It's like everything falls into place for both good things and bad things to happen. I had noticed one time when I was preparing to meet some friends for dinner that as I'm getting ready to head out, I go downstairs, open the garage door, preparing to leave, and then realize that I forgot to put on a belt. So I go running back up to my room, get a belt on, go back downstairs, and then I realize I don't have my keys. And I'm like, how did I forget that? So back upstairs, grab my keys, and then I'm like, I need to pee. so I peed. When I sit in the car and back out of my driveway that evening, I started thinking, that's kind of weird, isn't it? All these little things that slowed me down. Was there something, a guardian angel, giving me hindrances to slow me down so that a car accident's prevented or another situation might pop up that if I'm delayed by just a little bit, that wouldn't occur? Kind of gives you chills sometimes when you think about it, doesn't it? It almost sounds like I'm describing luck or divine intervention, which of course I'm skeptical of. But you have to admit sometimes that there are unusual occurrences or incidents that happen that can seem to defy explanation. I guess when I start thinking about my own life, I always tend to quote Sophia Petrillo from Golden Girls, I didn't get this old by being stupid. But if you think about it, I can't possibly deny that luck could be a factor, right? Especially on driving some of the roads that we drive on. Some of y'all can't drive for shit, and we're all lucky that we're alive when you think about the odds of being in a car accident that could be fatal or life-altering. But I wonder if you all think about that kind of situation. Is it possible to have a guardian angel or some sort of karma-like protection of you? And then on the flip side, are there such things as curses? And I think none of us would deny it, but we've probably quietly placed a curse on someone, more like wishful thinking probably, just out of anger. Not that it really meant anything, but sometimes, I have to admit, wished to curse on some people. If they had come true, it'd have made my life a whole lot easier, but, que sera, sera. But I can't help but think about my uncle who was killed in a car accident, the one I mentioned just last week. If it's true and someone else ran them off the road, had they been 10 seconds, 15, 20 seconds later or earlier, would it have happened? I can't help but dwell on that notion that perhaps it's one of those challenging concepts that you don't want to really believe it's true, because if that were the case, it's almost like if there was a God, that God's trying to kill him, right? Because all of that could be prevented. Or is this just the way life works and the way people are, and humans cause problems and accidents all the time? And if it wasn't my uncle, it would have been another car that this person would have driven them off the road and destroyed their lives. It's a really scary notion, isn't it? It's something really frightening to think about. I guess that kind of falls under the plot line of those Final Destination movies, right? Where you can never escape death. But we already know that, whether it's by a car accident or disease or old age, all of us are going to die. And if someone dies in their 90s, I hardly would think that you would consider that some sort of curse. But then I guess I'm also describing fate, right? Are we destined to our own fate? Can you change the course of your life? Like, for example, I am recording this episode on a night that I would usually be out to happy hour. I decided this morning that I wasn't going to go to happy hour. Was there some other reason, a factor that intervened and made me decide not to go tonight? Perhaps I was going to be in a car accident. Perhaps I was going to be stupid and be naked out in public and drunk and get arrested. Or I'm just being overly dramatic and considering a subject just to put together another Halloween episode for Alan After Dark. It's a little bit of all that, I think, because I think it's interesting to think about, right? Right. We've all heard the stories, haven't we? Someone who missed a flight and that plane crashes, 9/11 at the World Trade Center, people who turned out to be late that morning and weren't in the buildings, the roads we travel back and forth to work or out to have fun, you see a terrible accident and you think, wow, that could be me. Oh, a good example of that. I think it was last summer on our interstate highway, east and west lanes, in between as a very high wall. A truck going westbound lost a tire. The tire flew off. It bounded up along the interstate, over the median, slammed right into the windshield of a car going east, on the driver's side, through the windshield. The man died a little bit later on at the hospital. But think about that for a second. Of all the cars on the highway at that time, a tire comes off, it misses trucks and cars on the westbound side, bounces over the median, and slams into the windshield, killing the man. Honestly, that is a Final Destination plotline, isn't it? But does it have a deeper meaning other than just the quirks of circumstance and physics and geometry? Is there a power player in the background, the grand designer, a god, that just opts not to help on things like that? Or does that entity literally direct things like that to happen? And what in the hell could that poor man have done to deserve being killed by a runaway tire? I believe that most of us do want to have some sense that we are, at some measure, in control of our lives. We don't want to think that parts of our life could be out of our control. But if we're honest with ourselves, is there any denying that? Can we actually pretend like that's not true? That when we get out on the highway, there are many parameters that dictate whether or not we get to our destination safe and sound. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a god or the grand designer. I'm saying that every person on that road is a factor in whether or not we get to our destination. If someone is not paying attention, looking down at their phone, if somebody's driving recklessly, if somebody's drunk or high or otherwise impaired, if someone has a heart attack while driving, it happens. People having seizures and losing consciousness, it happens. Those are all factors in your life, in that equation, on whether or not you achieve the simple goal of arriving at your intended destination. When I think about it that way, it almost makes me hesitate to want to get out on the roads. How about you? And I guess that really does explain my own personality. I go into work very early. I do my grocery shopping very early. I try my best to avoid rush hours. I try to avoid the roads that are the busiest. I try to avoid the streets and the highways and roads that are known to be the most dangerous. Gosh, when I think about that too, I used to take this windy, narrow road to a previous job, thinking that at an early hour, it was still safer than all the others because there was less traffic. But this is a road, it's a 2-lane road, and there's plenty of blind hills and curbs. And I just remember one morning heading to work, still dark, not realizing that coming up this other side of this hill is a guy driving really fast, passing another car, obviously in a hurry for some reason that morning. And just as I topped the hill, they had gotten over from passing the car. 2 seconds earlier, and we would have hit head on, and I could have been killed. We both could have been killed. I keep thinking, what is so critical that it's worth risking your life? And I have to say, I think a lot of times it's just people's impatience. They can't wait an extra few minutes or seconds to come to a place in the road where they could see more clearly if traffic is coming and they could pass safely. You know what? That really is fucked up. But that person held my life in their hands just as much as I do when I'm on the road. Goddamn, fuck that. It's worth mentioning that after that incident on that road, that was the last time that I did take that route to work. I should add that it was just a few months ago that there was a head-on collision on that road, and it did result in fatalities. I know what you're probably thinking. Well, what else can you do? You can't just wrap yourself in bubble wrap and hide in a bomb shelter the rest of your life. That's not living. And I agree. You can't. We can only do the best we can with what we've got, right? I try to drive with caution and safety in mind. I don't want to be just a greasy spot on the interstate highway. You become as savvy as you can, aware of conditions, aware of people around you. If you see someone driving strangely or driving erratically, avoid them, get away from them, stay far behind them or get far ahead of them. Go to your doctor and get your checkups and take your prescriptions and try to be healthy. But also, you got to live your life, enjoy life, eat what you want, do what you want. It depends on the kind of life that you want, right? I do want to live longer, but I also want to live healthier. I don't want to be dependent on anyone in my older years. The thought scares the crap out of me. I'm sure that my brother would provide me with a closet and a food bowl and a water dish like he would any pet. Damn, he would savor that too much. I guess I better rethink that option. The bottom line is we have to live our lives the way we want to, pure and simple. I would advise living your life within your financial means. It wouldn't be fun to be 70 years old and to be homeless out on the streets. It does feel like what I'm describing is a form of fate, but I don't want it to sound that way. I don't think that we're defining the word fate in the way I see it. I don't view fate as having something behind it like God or some sort of divine intervention. I think we can look at the word as fate as it is what it is. What happens to us happens to us. There are accidents, there are mistakes, there are problems that are just part of everyday life. And it depends on how we navigate them. Genetics, your DNA, your family's DNA. Could that be a factor as well in your life, your fate, as we're defining it in this episode? Is there truly bad seeds? It's kind of hard to argue that there's not when you have people like John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy. There are some truly evil people in the world. And I have a tough time thinking it's just their environment. I mean, for God's sake, Adolf Hitler, what in the hell was in his background that would justify his hate, his bigotry, his racism, his anti-Semitic loathing of people that have done nothing to him? Maybe that's me grasping at straws as well, hoping that there is a scientific explanation for such things. It doesn't negate their evil, but perhaps if we knew genetically what makes people psychopaths, sociopaths, maybe there's a way that they could be treated that would prevent this crazy shit from happening. God, if there was a way to cure narcissism, Jesus, God, could you imagine how much better the world would be? There has to be a genetic component, doesn't there? I mean, it's not Darwinism, is it? It's not evolution, is it? Is it possible that there are genetic lines from thousands of years ago that are predisposed to evil, to violence, to hatred of other people? Perhaps part of it is connected to an alpha male type personality, animalistic, that truly some humans haven't evolved and developed those traits that would prevent you from being so wicked, so full of rage and destruction. I really do wonder about that. I think that's where my cynicism toward other people comes from. We've all witnessed it through history and through our own personal experiences. I've had friends who've been murdered, needlessly murdered. There is no justification for murder. But when you think about the people that committed those crimes, and you just want to ask them, what in the hell is wrong with you? Why did you think doing what you did was the right thing to do? That your life was going to be better by killing someone? I really have never understood that, but I guess I do cling to this hope that there is a genetic component that eventually humans will maybe breed out of our species. We can only hope, right? Seems almost impossible though, doesn't it? I remember, especially when I was finally getting the ropes of enjoying the dance clubs and having a good time on a Friday or Saturday night, luckily learning that not everybody is your friend. And that when you're in a busy nightclub trying to have a good time, there are people that are on the prowl, not for sex, but to rob you, to harm you, to assault you. And it is a fine line on being able to decipher whether someone has good intentions or bad intentions. I remember when a beloved member of our community here was murdered on a night that should have been just a good time, a hookup, a fun one-night stand, and that's it. He winds up murdered, dead. And I remember the steps that we took after that if you really wanted to hook up with someone, you took extra precautions to make sure that you would be protected. For example, if it was someone that wasn't known in the community, I'd make sure my bartender saw them clearly and would say, this is his name that he told me. And also, if I was following them back to their house, their apartment, or even to a hotel, I would take a picture of their license plate and I would text it to at least 3 friends. And I would let them know when we arrived at our destination that I had done that. And so that if anything went wrong, friends knew who I was with and what the license plate number was and what their name was as they told me. Sometimes it made a guy mad a little bit, but when they understood the reasons why I was doing it, most of them were okay with it and understood that it was just to keep us both safe. And I encouraged them, if they wanted to, take a picture of my license plate and send it to a friend. I was very open to that, but it was really tragic to think about that now, the steps that we took. And, well, if I was still hooking up a lot, I would be taking those steps even today. I'm not really into that now. It happens on occasion, but usually it's in a parking lot, so we're all good on that. It's really sad that we take those steps, but it gives us a sense of control, doesn't it? And I shudder to think that surviving a one-night stand is just a matter of luck, a twist of fate, a draw of the cards. Thank you for joining me for this Halloween episode of Alan After Dark. Remember, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. We'll see you soon.